He thought he could get away with attacking a defenseless woman, no consequences, no witnesses, just another night in the city. But out of nowhere, Chuck Norris appeared. What happened next left everyone speechless. Subscribe now and tell us, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. The city pulsed with the chaotic rhythm of the evening rush. Neon lights flickered against the wet pavement, their reflections stretching and twisting in the puddles left behind by the earlier rain. Cars weaved through traffic, their headlights carving bright trails through the darkness, the distant wail of a siren echoing somewhere in the maze of towering buildings. Pedestrians moved in waves, some in a hurry, some lost in the glow of their phone screens, and one of them, moving more cautiously than the rest, was Emily. Her hand rested protectively on her stomach as she walked, each step deliberate, exhaustion weighing down on her shoulders. It had been a long day at work, later than usual, and now she found herself alone, navigating the thinning crowd toward the bus stop. The noise of the city should have been comforting, familiar, but something felt off. A chill crept up her spine, an instinctual warning whispering that she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder. The street behind her looked the same, people coming and going, disappearing into subway stations and doorways, but the feeling wouldn't leave. It only grew stronger with each step. And then, she heard it. Footsteps. Not the hurried stride of a late commuter. Not the aimless wandering of someone lost in thought. These were different. Measured. Intentional. Following her. Her heartbeat quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe she was just tired. But deep down, she knew better. She reached a crosswalk and hesitated, letting a small group of people pass. As they moved by, she stole a glance to the side, and that's when she saw him. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Moving with a quiet confidence that made her stomach knot. His uniform was unmistakable, the dark blue of the city police. The badge on his chest caught the glow of the streetlights. His name tag read Grayson. Emily's breath hitched. She didn't know him personally, but she knew about him. Everyone did. Officer Grayson wasn't the kind of cop you called for help. He was the kind that made people nervous, the kind spoken about in hushed tones. Rumors of unnecessary force. Stops without reason. People walking away with bruises hidden under their sleeves. But nothing ever stuck. He was the law. And the law didn't answer to whispers. And now, he was following her. She kept walking, her pulse hammering in her ears. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just heading the same way. But every fiber of her being screamed that he wasn't. Up ahead, a narrow alley cut between buildings. A shortcut to the bus stop. It was risky, but she was running out of options. If he was really following her, it was better to know now, while she still had choices. She turned sharply into the alley, her footsteps echoing off the brick walls. The air smelled of damp concrete and distant garbage. A flickering street lamp cast jagged shadows across the pavement. She exhaled, shakily. Maybe she had been wrong. Then, crunch. The heavy sound of a boot on pavement shattered the silence. She spun around. Grayson stood at the mouth of the alley, blocking her way back to the street. The dim lighting carved sharp angles into his face, making his expression look even colder. His mouth twisted into something between a smirk and a sneer. This wasn't random. He had been waiting for this. Her body screamed run, but before she could move, he was already closing the distance. His hand shot out, fingers clamping onto her shoulder with bruising force. Emily gasped, her knees nearly buckling under the weight of his grip. Then, he shoved her. Not just a push. A message. A reminder of who had the power here. She stumbled, her foot catching on the uneven pavement. The ground rushed up to meet her. Instinct took over, her arms wrapped around her stomach as she crashed down. Pain jolted through her elbow, but the fear in her chest was worse. She could taste blood in her mouth, her lip must have split on impact. The sharp tang mixed with nausea as the world spun around her. Above her, Grayson loomed. His shadow stretched over her, still, unhurried. He wasn't worried. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he looked amused. Emily tried to scramble backward, but her body refused to move. And then, everything changed. A shadow bigger than Grayson's swallowed the alley in a heartbeat. The air shifted. A presence. And then, in a voice as calm as a summer breeze, carrying the weight of absolute certainty, she heard. That's enough. Chuck Norris had arrived. What happened next? You won't believe it. Subscribe now. And tell us, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. She had never felt this helpless. This exposed. Somewhere beyond the alley, life continued, cars honked, people laughed, the city moved forward, oblivious. No one knew. No one was coming. And worst of all, he knew it. Pain radiated through Emily's body as she fought to steady her breath. The fall had rattled her, left her limbs sluggish, her mind clouded. Instinctively, her hands clutched at her stomach, desperate to protect the fragile life growing inside her. But she knew this wasn't about that. Grayson stood over her, unmoving. Watching. His amusement was slow, measured, the kind of satisfaction a predator feels when the fight is already over. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. She had heard the stories. The quiet warnings passed in hushed voices. Grayson wasn't just a bad cop. He was something worse. A man who had never been told no. A man who knew exactly how much fear he commanded. And now, in this dark alley, away from the crowd, he had her exactly where he wanted. She forced herself to move, pushing up onto one elbow, but his boot shifted, a silent warning. Stay down. She froze. His hand hovered near his belt, fingers tapping lazily against the batten at his hip. The movement was casual, almost bored. But she wasn't stupid. She knew what it meant. He was in control. Her fingers scraped against the cold concrete as she tried to push herself up further. Pain flared through her elbow, a dull, throbbing ache. The silence between them was suffocating. Just beyond the alley, life continued as if nothing was happening. A car horn. Laughter. A city that had learned how to ignore. Emily's breath was shallow, uneven. She needed to think, to do something. But the fear was suffocating, heavy as iron, pressing her down. Then Grayson sighed. Tilted his head. As if reading her mind. And without warning, he stepped forward. Closer. The shift was immediate. The space between them vanished, his presence crushing. Emily's muscles locked, terror pulsing through her body like electricity. She wanted to scream, wanted to run, but her limbs refused to move. Grayson crouched, resting his arms on his knees, steadying her. His face gave away nothing, but his eyes told her everything. He enjoyed this. She had heard the rumors. The stories about women caught alone in the wrong place, about whispered threats and unseen bruises. They had always seemed distant. Something that happened to other people. But now, she was living it. And just like those stories, she already knew how this one would end. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Someone walking past the alley. A man. For one fleeting second, his gaze flicked in their direction. Emily's heart leapt. She opened her mouth, a desperate plea ready to tear free. But before she could speak, Grayson moved. His hand dropped, just slightly, to his batten. He didn't even have to draw it. The motion alone was enough. The man hesitated. Just for a second. And that was all it took. Emily watched, helpless, as the man turned his head away and kept walking. His silhouette melted into the crowd beyond, swallowed by the bright, busy street. She wanted to scream after him, to beg for help. But the words wouldn't come. And even if they did, she already knew. No one would help. Because that was how it always happened. People saw. They always saw. but they never interfered. Fear in this city was like a disease. It spread through the streets, seeped into apartment walls, whispered warnings between neighbors. And men like Grayson thrived in that silence. The baton tapped against his gloved palm. A slow, deliberate rhythm. Waiting. For what? She didn't know. Maybe for her to break first. Maybe just for his own amusement. Her fingers curled into fists against the pavement. Her body screamed at her to move. To fight. To do something. But what could she do? He was bigger. Stronger. Armed. And she was alone. Her fear twisted into something colder. Something darker. Because this wasn't just about him wanting to hurt her. This was about power. And right now, he had all of it. Her breath hitched as he took another step forward. Then, everything changed. A new shadow fell over them. Bigger than Grayson's. A presence. The air shifted. And then, in a voice as calm as a summer breeze, carrying the weight of absolute certainty, she heard. That's enough. Chuck Norris had arrived. What happened next? You won't believe it. The rubber sole of his boot scraped against the pavement. No one was coming. No one was going to stop him. And he knew it. The city had no eyes. It moved, breathed, lived, but it did not see. It did not care. People passed by on the sidewalk just beyond the alley, their faces bathed in the glow of streetlights and neon signs. They laughed, talked, checked their phones, never once sparing a glance toward the darkened space between the buildings, where a woman lay trembling. Emily was trapped in that blindness. That cold, unfeeling void where only those who suffered could truly see. And Grayson? He stood over her, baton tapping methodically against his gloved palm. Slow. Deliberate. A countdown. There was no urgency in his stance. No hesitation. No fear of consequences. He had all the time in the world. And he wanted her to know it. Emily tried to push herself up again, but her limbs felt like lead. The fall had rattled her, left her sluggish, and fear did the rest. She had never felt so utterly helpless. No weapon. No way to fight back. And even if she screamed, who would listen? Who would risk stepping in? Grayson shifted his weight. The slow scrape of his boot against the concrete sent a chill through her bones. He stepped forward, and suddenly, the air in the alley seemed thicker. Heavier. The space around her smaller. His shadow stretched long and jagged under the flickering street lamp, swallowing hers whole. Her pulse pounded. She had to do something. Anything. And then, something changed. A ripple in the air. A shift in the silence. The rhythm of the city stuttered. The tapping of the baton stopped. Grayson turned his head, just slightly. Just enough to acknowledge what Emily had already felt. A presence. Someone was watching. At first, it wasn't clear who. The street beyond was still full of people, but none of them were looking. No one had stopped. But then, she saw him. A man. Not just any man. A figure that materialized from the crowd, stepping out from the sea of indifferent faces like something carved from stone. He was tall. Broad-shouldered. Dressed simply, dark jeans, a plain shirt, a faded denim jacket. Nothing flashy. Nothing loud. But his presence filled the space around him, impossible to ignore. His posture was relaxed, but there was nothing casual about it. His steps were measured, deliberate, the kind of walk that did not belong to a man uncertain of his place in the world. He did not belong to the blind city. He had eyes. And he had seen. Emily barely processed the shift as he crossed the street, stepping onto the sidewalk without hurry. Without hesitation. He didn't weave through the crowd. The crowd moved for him. Even those who weren't looking seemed to sense something. an unspoken command in his presence. With each step, the gap between him and the rest of the world widened. Grayson turned fully now. His shoulders squared. His grip on the baton tightened. He knew, just as Emily did, this man was different. Not a bystander. Not a witness. A force. And he was coming straight for them. The baton in Grayson's hand stilled, his fingers clenching around the handle. His expression flickered between irritation and something else. Caution. Emily's breath came in short, shallow gasps. She didn't know if this man was here to help her, or if he was just another piece in a game she didn't understand. But something about the way he moved told her one thing. This was not a man who ignored things. He reached the entrance of the alley and stopped. For a moment, the world held its breath. The neon lights barely touched his face, but his eyes, dark, unreadable. They weren't on Emily. They were locked onto Grayson. No words were spoken. None were needed. Emily felt it before Grayson did, the way the space around them changed. The way the very air seemed to shift. It was the unspoken law of predators. The moment when one recognizes another. Grayson's jaw tightened. He wasn't afraid, not yet. But he was aware. And that was something. The man in the denim jacket took another step forward, closing the last bit of space between them. He didn't break eye contact. Didn't flinch. Grayson inhaled through his nose. Slow. Measured. Calculating. Could he still win this? Could he still walk away? Emily saw the answer in his stance. He wasn't backing down. But neither was the man who had come for him. Something told her this was about to end very, very differently than Grayson had planned. The alley was silent. But not empty. Beyond it, the city still breathed. Cars honked. Laughter echoed. The rhythm of life continued. Oblivious. But here, in the shadows between the buildings, everything was about to change. And when it did, Grayson would never forget it. Who was this man? And what happened next? She had never seen a man like this before. Someone who could step into a space and shift the balance of power with nothing more than his presence. He hadn't spoken a word. Yet Grayson had already squared his shoulders, muscles tensing beneath his uniform. The baton, once tapping with casual arrogance, was still. His fingers curled tighter around it, knuckles whitening. Emily could almost hear the calculations running through his mind, the way his gaze flicked over the stranger, sizing him up. Taking in his frame, his stance, the way he carried himself. And the man in the denim jacket? Motionless. But there was nothing passive about him. His weight was balanced. His posture was loose, but every muscle was primed for movement. He wasn't waiting with hesitation. He was waiting with patience. The kind of patience that belonged to someone who had been in situations like this before. Someone who had seen men like Grayson, and had already decided how this would end. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Grayson's face. Unease. It was there. Gone in an instant. Smothered beneath years of unchecked authority. But Emily saw it. And so did the stranger. The moment stretched. And then, Grayson made his choice. He moved first. It happened fast. 1 second, the alley was thick with tension. The next, Grayson lunged. The baton cut through the air in a sharp downward arc, whistling with the force behind it. A strike meant to shatter bone. It didn't. The stranger sidestepped at the last moment. His movement was fluid, effortless, as if he had anticipated the attack before it had even begun. The baton sliced through empty air. And in the fraction of a second it took for Grayson to recover, the counterattack came. A fist, driven with brutal precision into his solar plexus. The impact was devastating. A sickening thud. The air left Grayson's lungs in a sharp, gasping choke. His body jerked forward, doubling over. His grip on the baton loosened. For just a moment. It was enough. The second blow followed. This one, to the ribs. Controlled. Deliberate. Not wild. Not reckless. A strike placed with purpose. Grayson staggered. His boots scuffed against the concrete, his body twisting in pain. Emily barely breathed. She had seen fights before. Street scuffles. Drunken brawls outside clubs. But this was different. This wasn't a chaotic mess of fists and rage. This was a lesson. The man in the denim jacket did not fight for sport. He fought to end things. Grayson snarled. His pride wounded more than his body. He recovered too fast. Too fast for someone who had just taken 2 direct hits. He was strong. That much was clear. He had spent years throwing his weight around, using his size, his badge, his training to dominate those weaker than him. But for the first time, he wasn't the strongest one here. He adjusted. Changed his grip. 2 hands on the baton now. He had underestimated this man once. He wouldn't do it again. His next attack was more measured. More controlled. A low swing aimed for the knee. A move designed to end a fight before it could continue. It missed. This time, the stranger didn't just dodge. He stepped into the attack. His hand snapped out. Caught Grayson's wrist, mid-swing. A heartbeat later, he twisted. The motion was sharp. Precise. A maneuver meant to disarm. Grayson grunted. His grip faltered. Pain jolted up his arm. The baton clattered to the ground, skidding across the pavement. Emily felt it. The shift. Something final. Grayson tried to yank his arm free, but the stranger held firm. A second later, he moved again. This time, stepping in. Using his own body weight to flip Grayson off balance. The officer hit the ground hard. Concrete met bone. A sharp impact. The breath left him in a stunned exhale. For a moment, he just lay there. Chest rising and falling. Trying to understand what had just happened. The stranger stepped over him. Looking down with an expression that was unreadable. Calm. In a way that sent a different kind of fear crawling up Emily's spine. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't celebrating. He was just done. Grayson groaned. Rolled onto his side. His face contorted with pain. With fury. And then his hand twitched. Towards his belt. Towards the gun. A single, sharp movement cut him off. A boot. Coming down, not on his hand, but beside it. Firm. Unyielding. Enough to send a warning through the ground beneath them. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. Don't. Grayson froze. For the first time since this night began, real fear entered his eyes. Emily exhaled. Shakily. Adrenaline making her limbs feel weak. She didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if Grayson would try again. Didn't know if he would take this humiliation and turn it into something worse later. But she knew one thing. Tonight, for the first time, he had lost. And someone had finally made him feel powerless. The stranger stepped back. And just like that, it was over. He lifted his foot from where it had been planted near Grayson's hand. No words. No final warning. He didn't even look at Emily. He simply turned. His movements as unhurried as they had been when he arrived, like this was just another stop on his way to somewhere else. He walked away. Back toward the mouth of the alley. Back into the city. And just like that, he was gone. The fight was over. But something told Emily. This was far from the end. Grayson's ragged breathing filled the alley, uneven and harsh as he lay sprawled on the cold ground. The man who had carried all the power just moments ago now had none. His fingers twitched against the pavement, curling into a fist, as if desperately trying to grip onto the last remnants of his control. But it was gone. His pride had taken the deepest wound of all, and that was a pain he wasn't used to feeling. Emily had not moved. She sat where she had fallen, watching. Watching as the world shifted in a way she never could have imagined. The stranger had stepped away from Grayson. His back turned. His silhouette sharp against the glow of the street beyond the alley. He didn't gloat. Didn't taunt. Didn't revel in the moment. He simply left. As if what had just happened required no further action. And maybe for him, it didn't. But Grayson? He wasn't done. A low growl of frustration rumbled from his chest as he pushed himself up, his limbs trembling from the punishment they had taken. His face twisted in rage. His jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck stood out. He wasn't used to losing. Wasn't used to being on the receiving end of the kind of violence he so effortlessly inflicted on others. And Emily saw the moment, the exact second, when his mind shifted. Survival turned to revenge. His hand moved toward his belt. Fingers grazing the holster. Even now, even with everything that had just happened, even with the weight of defeat pressing down on him, he was still a man with a weapon. But the stranger hadn't left yet. The second Grayson reached for his gun. The man in the denim jacket turned. No rush. No panic. Just a controlled, precise movement. But his eyes. Those dark, unreadable eyes. They locked onto Grayson with an intensity that made the officer freeze. It wasn't fear that stopped him. It was certainty. The undeniable truth that if he kept going, it would end badly for him. Grayson's fingers hesitated. Just above the holster. Trembling. Indecision flickered across his face. His breath came fast. Sharp. His rage battling against something more primal. An instinct. One that told him, for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control anymore. The stranger took one step forward. That was all it took. Grayson's hand dropped. His lips curled in frustration. He wanted to fight back. Wanted to reclaim the dominance that had been stripped from him. But deep down, he knew. He had already lost. The stranger said nothing. He didn't have to. Emily felt it in the air, the finality of it. Grayson had a choice. Push further. And lose more than just his pride. Or accept that for the first time. He was powerless. A murmur stirred at the entrance of the alley. The crowd, the same one that had ignored what was happening before, was watching now. Eyes that had once turned away were locked in place. Phones were out. Cameras recording. The glow of their screens captured evidence that would not be buried. Emily's heart raced. For the first time, the city saw. And Grayson must have felt it too. He turned his head slightly, his gaze flicking toward the figures gathering at the edges of the alley. Some stood in quiet disbelief. Others murmured among themselves. But none of them moved to help him. Not because they were afraid, but because they had already chosen a side. And it wasn't his. A flicker of realization passed through Grayson's eyes. Or maybe just the bitter taste of inevitability. Then, a sound. Distant at first. Barely a murmur against the hum of the city. But then, it grew. Sharp. Distinct. Sirens. Grayson's expression darkened. His body tensed. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the wet pavement. And for the first time that night, he looked uncertain. Emily could hardly believe it. He was going to be held accountable. The stranger remained still, watching, but making no move to stay. He had done what needed to be done. His presence had shifted the tides, had tilted the balance away from men like Grayson and toward something closer to justice. But he had no intention of waiting to see how it ended. He turned again, this time with finality, and walked toward the mouth of the alley. His steps were as steady as they had been when he arrived, unaffected by the weight of what had just transpired. He was leaving, and Grayson saw it too. For a brief moment, something desperate flickered across his face. He wanted to call out, to demand something, but no words came, because there was nothing left to say. Nothing he could do to undo what had already been set in motion. The crowd parted as the stranger stepped onto the sidewalk, blending into the city as seamlessly as he had emerged from it. Gone. Emily barely had time to process it before the police arrived. Cruisers skidded to a halt. Doors burst open. Uniformed officers spilled into the street, hands hovering near their holsters, ready for anything. But what they found wasn't a riot, wasn't chaos. What they found was their own. Grayson, bloodied, on the ground, his reputation shattered. And this time, there was no escaping it. Justice was not blind tonight. Emily took a breath. For the first time, the city did not feel so indifferent. Because tonight, someone had finally seen. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more. Check out our other videos for more gripping content. And let us know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments.